What's up, everybody? It's Alex from Heavy New York, invading California for NAMM 2019, and today we have another awesome musician from Fit for an Autopsy. We are here with Patrick Sheridan. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, it's so great to have you here. So, we spoke with Tim. You're working on some new music. Is this new music going to be a direct follow-up to the Great Collapse, or do you think this record's going to be like its own entity, experiment a little bit?
We always kind of try to do new things, but we also always try to hold on to the things that make us who we are. So I would say it's maybe a little from column A, a little from column B. You know what I mean? We're going to doing some new things and trying to step away and step forward, move forward with the sound that we want to create, which, we're only sure of from record to record on where we want to head. But it's still going to hold on to a lot of the old Fit for an Autopsy stuff too. So it'll be a good mix.
Yeah. Do you, at this point in your career, do you kind of like go into the studio knowing what you want and you guys have like a formula you stick with, or is the making of each record kind of like its own experience?
We have a really interesting dynamic where, we have Will Putney in the band. He's not a touring guy. He's the guy that's the brains behind the sound. Will and I started this band in 2007, and we've been working together to like create a thing. You know what I mean? And Will has always had this really great stronghold on what the band needs to sound like. He's amazing at writing, so we kick ideas around, but at the end of the day, Will's the main contributor when it comes to writing music. So it's an interesting dynamic where, when we come in the studio, Will and I talk about where we want to go, what directions we want to head in. Sometimes we trade some riffs back and forth. Then I go out on tour and I come home and stuff is starting to be written. We're kicking ideas around. Tim's listening, Blue's listening, Hosian, Joe, we're all, making suggestions and changing things, but it is a different dynamic than most bands, I think, because we do have a non-touring member who's very creative and very good at his job. So it's almost like a blessing and a curse. You know what I mean? Because sometimes we know exactly where we're going to end up as a band, and then other times Will just come up with this monster idea and we just roll with it. Yeah. So, it's interesting.
Yeah, Will produces a bunch of other bands as well, right?
If you've bought a heavy, extreme, metal kind of record in the past 10 years, there's a good chance it's got Will Putney's name on it.
So does him working with other bands maybe allow Fit for an Autopsy to bring in some new elements?
Sure. We're all always influenced by what you hear, but because he's so hands-on in the industry, he's hearing so many different things all the time. It influences us. I mean, people will say we sound like this band or sound like that band, but I mean, it's just because those are the bands that make us want to play music. And anybody that claims that they don't sound like any band is full of shit, because everybody sounds like somebody sometimes. Yeah. You know what I mean? So. Yeah.
And I just have two more questions for you.
Sure.
One question, I brought this up with Tim, is because, the last time I spoke to you, it was on your tour with While She Sleeps, Arch Enemy and Trivium,
Sure.
And then you did a tour with Sepultura, Goat Whore, and Obscura,
Sure.
And now you're going on tour with Hatebreed and Obituary. Have you noticed like a different type of audience depending on like what tour you're on?
I think heavy music is at this interesting point now where metalheads and hardcore kids and punk rockers are all starting to kind of identify with each other to a certain degree, because I feel like hardcore's had a really big influence on heavy music over the past like 20 years, especially 15, 20 years, where more metal bands are becoming socially aware and writing lyrics that are less like fantasy based and more based on like the actual problems that are going on in our society today. And I really feel like that's because hardcore bands have stepped up their ability. You have better players in hardcore bands, better music, better song structure. So now metal kids are paying attention to it, and they're being influenced by the things that these people are saying, and they're starting to see it differently. And plus, and on a society scale, we have a much different kind of social structure than we had 20 years ago. So kids want to talk about the problems today, and that's a very punk and hardcore thing. So now we're all kind of looking at each other's music in this way, like, wow, that's cool, and this is cool. So, Tim and I, and Will too, we all come from that hardcore background where we grew up in the hardcore scene. So seeing more metal bands do that, I think it's making everything more accessible. So a Hatebreed fan or a Terror fan might be more inclined to listen to a Fit for an Autopsy song now, because we're not singing about like dragons and monsters in the woods and stuff. We're singing about like monsters that are controlling your taxes and your money and the things that we do to each other every day. So it's kind of interesting, you know what I mean? So I think it's definitely more accessible across the board.
Yeah, absolutely. And you reach multiple audiences. Like, so many people know who you are now just from being on different tours.
I think that's the key, too. I think bands need to realize that pigeonholing yourself and calling yourself any one thing is a problem. You know, like everybody says, so you're a deathcore band. It's like, that's cool, but like, we want to tour with Cro-Mags. I want to go on tour with the Cro-Mags. They're a fucking incredible band. I've been listening to them since I can remember. And now I get to go out with Hatebreed, who we love, Obituary, who's that's right in our lane. That's who we want to tour with. And then Terror and the Cro-Mags. It's like this mix of bands that I would be stoked to go see live every night, but I get to go out on tour with them. So, you know, it's really cool. It was like this in the 90s because of things like the Ozfests and things like that. We're mixing it up so much. You would get like Sworn Enemy, Lamb of God, Killswitch Engaged, Hatebreed, and Slipknot all on the same stage within like a few hours of each other. Yeah. So I think that stuff helps, you know.
And the final question I'd like to ask you is, let's go over your gear rundown. What is your weapon of choice? Are you an Ibanez user like Tim? Or?
I was with Ibanez for about 8 years. I recently made a switch. It was just time for me to move on to something different. Getting older, tastes are changing, you know, into different things. So I'm actually working with a company out of Poland called Mayonnaise Guitars. They build like these crazy 6, 7, 8-string like super interesting customs, like just shred machines. They're incredible, like too fancy for my fingers, you know. I'm lucky to be there. And so I'm working with them. Seymour Duncan pickups, hip shot bridges on those guitars. I use the hip shot Contour right now. I have a couple different amps in my arsenal. I have a Mesa Boogie dual rectifier. I very recently purchased a PRS Archon, which I am blown away with, so I got a feeling that's going to make it in the mix. We always use Mesa Boogie cabinets, you know, oversized rectifier cabs. Those are our favorites. I got a few pedals. I just picked up one of those Eventide H9s. Thank you, Eventide, for hooking that up. And it's really cool, like onboard miniature effects processor unit that just sticks right to my my little pedal board that I got going on. But I also use MXR carbon copy and MXR reverb. I have a Boss NS2 noise suppressor. That's going to get replaced by a Fortin Zool, which is probably one of the best gates I've ever used in my life. I have a polytuner on there, and a couple things running through the loop, a couple things going in the front, and that's it. Maxon 808X overdrive, and a Maxon 808 overdrive. I rotate between the two. Ernie Ball strings, Dunlop picks. That's the gamut.
You just explain your gear better than 90% of the people I interviewed.
Well, you know what it is? It's like, I'm not the sickest guitar player on earth. You know, I'm just like a regular meat and potatoes kind of guy. I got a couple tricks, but the things that I love are gear. I love gear. I love all these guitars. Like Mayonnaise is the guitars I play live. They're the company I like using. I love their stuff, but I also like Jackson. I like Comparison. I like Ibanez. I played them for years, you know. But just because I don't endorse it doesn't mean I don't want to buy it. And just because I don't get things for free from a company doesn't mean I won't go to them and pick something up. You know what I mean? Like, I just love gear, and I know what I like to use live, and I know what achieves my tone. So I better know it. You know what I mean? I better be able to describe it. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, that's it.
Awesome.
Pretty simple.
So before we go, I want to thank you so much for your time. It's great to interview you again.
Awesome.
Is there just is there a time frame we could be expecting the new Fit for an Autopsy record?
Well, what I can tell you guys is that it's very, very far along in the process of the record. Like, we're pretty close. I'm not going to get into too many details, but I can tell you that with this new tour coming up, there's going to be some music, maybe a video, maybe some things released. We're working on some stuff in the background. Nuclear Blast isn't really putting their thumb down on when they want it released, but we're pushing this, start getting it rolling just around the Hatebreed tour. Pre-orders, stuff like that will start to roll out soon, and we'll take it from there and see how it goes.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Patrick.
Man, I appreciate you.
Patrick of Fit for an Autopsy. Pick up The Great Collapse if you haven't already and catch them on their tour with Hatebreed, Obituary, Terror, and Cro-Mags. We'll see you next time on Heavy New York, everybody.